now. But I will call this meeting to order here at 3:05 under, I'm sorry, I forgot my speech.
Albemarle County's continuity of government.
Thank you. Under Albemarle County's continuity of governance ordinance. We have members joining us remotely and in person. Thank you all very much for being here. I'll open first to public comment. If we have any members of the public, I don't believe here in person, but anybody remotely who would like to speak, now is an opportunity. Thank you very much. I don't see any hands going up. No, okay. Announcements from board members. Anybody have anything they'd like to share? I'd like to welcome Meredith Cole here, who's joining us. She will be replacing Carla as Charlottesville representative next month. Thank you very much for coming to sit in. We're really excited to have you. I have one brief announcement I'll make, actually. The Scottsville Town Council last Monday voted to enter a contract agreement with VDOT for $400,000 of sidewalk improvement in town. That'll include connections to and with the library. It's a little unclear what the scope of project will be, you know, what the, I think there will probably be phasing of the project to control cost overrun. So I would say the library has a good chance of being connected, if not in the first phase, in a second phase of 2 or 3 potential phases. So roughly a 2 to 5 year timeline if we can't get it done in this phase. So yeah, very exciting. We'll see some construction start on some of those improvements probably in about a year's time. And if that can't include the library, then we'll pick that up in the next round. So the library was one of the larger organizations to endorse the project with the town. Thank you all who were here and voted on that for your endorsement of the project. That was helpful and persuasive. And I think if you guys see fit, it might be worth following that up with another round of correspondence to acknowledge the contract moving forward and just to endorse the project getting done again and thank them for their work. Any objections to that? Here or virtually? And Lisa, thank you. I see you here with us now. Okay, well, no objections. David, I'll get with you and we can draft something.
Great.
Okay.
I think the last letter came from the board president, so that might be out of the question, but
right.
maybe Wendy could help us come up.
Yeah. That sounds good. Okay.
I also have a brief announcement.
Okay.
Not so much as an announcement as I wanted to take a moment to celebrate and thank Carla for her 10 years of service on the library board. Meredith, it's usually only 8 years. Carla got 2 extra. Lucky her. So staff worked on selecting some books for you, Carla, that will be available. I'm going to share the pictures of the titles with you. 10 books, 1 for each year of service. So you started midterm and you had 2 full terms after that. So all these books are being added to the library, the Central Library collection with a book plate and I'm thanking you for your service at JMRL. And I can put any of them on hold for you if you like, but I'll send you the list so that you can take a look at them. And then I've also got a present for you, which will also be on hold for you at the Central Library. So virtually, thank you very much for your service, Carla. It's much appreciated. And Carla led the personnel committee through a salary study and a compression study and really did a lot in her 10 years to work on bringing JMRL salaries up to where they need to be and has done quite a bit of work on the next round of that. I'm going to hand it over soon, but thank you, Carla, from JMRL.
Thank you so much, Carla. Very significant work.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say really quickly that it's been an honor. It's just been an absolute honor to work with David and to work with John before him and to serve with so many great trustees over the years. I hope I have been an advocate for the JMRL staff and for the Charlottesville community and for JMRL as a whole. I was thinking about so much that has been accomplished in the last 10 years. We have a new Crozet Library, a new North Side. We have the Nelson expansion. The bookmobiles have been updated. In fact, every single facility has been updated in some way over the last 10 years. But also, I was thinking about the major crises that our community has had to deal with: COVID, the events around 2017, and of course the earthquake was really a big deal in Louisa, and so I'm so very proud to be associated with JMRL during those times, even if just in a small way. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you, Carla. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank And I'll miss you.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank you to everybody. And I'm gonna
Thank you.
Technical difficulties.
Okay.
She may.
Carla, you sounded like you were about to say something. Do you want to unmute and try that one more time?
sorry about that. Yeah, I'm hoping to kind of chill for the rest of 2021 and then maybe get involved with the Friends in 2022. So thank
Well,
y'all.
We will certainly, I'm sure, be calling you for a little bit of advice here and there as we move forward with more compression related things to see how you had handled it so well in the past. And thank you again for all your work. Okay, if no other announcements, we'll roll right along into continuing education here. We have.
Do we want to do the minutes? I'm not sure.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, we didn't put that on there. No, it's up at the top. I didn't do that. Yes, we've all had a chance to review. Thank you very much. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes for our last meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Jim. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. I believe that gets us to a majority. Not quite, almost. Okay, well, minutes accepted. Handbook working group?
So David and I, mostly David, have a presentation that Thomas asked us to put together. We've talked about the employee handbook for probably 9 straight meetings now. And we wanted kind of, and we're essentially ready to unveil it after a meeting this week. But Thomas asked us to put together a kind of a brief talk through about the motivation and the process that we went through, and what is this thing and why did we do it, and how did we get here. So what I call the origin story, you know, as a trustee going through your orientation, you're told, this is how we do this, this is how we do this. And for our personnel and HR function, we rely on the city of Charlottesville. So the city of Charlottesville personnel manual is our personnel manual. That was what I understood. And that's part of our JMRL's admin services agreement. But in around 2008, the policy committee was looking at the policy manual overall and sort of looking into splitting it potentially into some policies that are, there's many policies. We asked the question, who are the consumers of the policy manual? And so it's the public who needs to know how to use the library and how we operate. It's the governors, meaning trustees and staff generally of how do we conduct meetings and decisions and so forth. And then there are a few at policy level, there are a few policies that are at a just sort of aimed towards staff, and that members of the public or patrons don't need to kind of know to use what the disciplinary process is for staff. That was the one that popped up, the very first one that popped up in my mind it came up for schedule review. I was like, well, why is this part of the policy manual on the same level as conduct in the library that applies? So at that point, we were looking at sort of a reorg. How can we categorize, not to make new policies, but categorize the policies that we have, contextualize them, make sure it's clear which policies are for which stakeholder and what do we read. And one of the things we talked about, well, the things that are policy but really don't impact the public, we might move. They're still public records and available to the public. We might move those into sort of like we have procedures that are also public records, move those into something that's not public facing because it's just not relevant. So as a point of that, we realize that there's some gaps between what's there in policy and what we've written down and what the city personnel manual. So around that time, we sort of looked at the personnel manual to try to ask some questions. Well, is this covered? Is this covered? And really, we learned or realized that the city personnel manual is written at a very general level for the entire city. So if you think of the city, it has departments, it has fire and police, it has social workers, it has election officials, it has a library. Is not officially a department of the city, but it sort of functions from this policy level as sort of that. And what we learned is that the city of Charlottesville is written at a very broad, very high level, and it includes some salary type stuff, but not really anything about day-to-day. There's no one size fits all. What do you wear to work for all of those departments? It just has one example. So it's not covered there. So we, at that point, David sort of talk to the managers, say, what are we doing at the branch level? And I think what you found is most of that sort of thing was covered in orientation documents. And a lot of it was covered, but it was covered at a branch by branch level in sort of an orientation packet you got, and wasn't really, it wasn't necessary. There were some slight variations from branch to branch. So if somebody were to transfer, for example, they wouldn't necessarily expect the same thing to work the same way. And it wasn't really written down for convenient reference all in one place. You maybe would leaf through your packet your orientation packet. So the goals were to take what would normally be covered by, for library specific type of things that employees need to know, take the things that they've already been told at a sort of a branch by branch and consolidate those and make them consistent across branches and create one go-to document for the entire, for all employees. And again, this is it's an operation level or a procedural level document. So it's a public record like everything, but it's not a policy per se. It's not going to be part of the policy manual. It's a separate handbook that tells employees what do you need to know. So that was the goal and what we identified as the need. So late last year, the board commissioned a working group to put this together or look at putting it together. And the board volunteers were Tony and myself. And then I think David put the call out to all staff, and the volunteers from the staff were Lindsay Idison, the Northside manager, Camille Thompson, Gordon Branch manager, Megan England, who at the time was the Scottsville manager. And then later, Megan, when she transitioned out of JMRL, was joined. We put up another call, and Brittany Eversberg, collections manager, our circulation manager, joined. And so those are the people who did all the work, basically. Okay, so I'll turn it. So I think David will take over with describing the steps we went through to get started with that group.
Sure. So the first thing we did is reached out to various resources that JMRL uses in the library world and our local community. We checked in with the state library, who confirmed that JMRL was on the right track to kind of codify this personnel information, get it all in one place and have it available for staff and board review. We began a thorough review of JMRL's peer libraries in the state, which are identified in our 5-year plan process, and our national peer libraries, and any other publicly available libraries that we could identify that had some sort of either personnel manual or employee handbook available on the web. We also expanded to look at some other organizations. Tony brought in some UVA organizations. We looked at some corporations. We just looked out there. What do handbooks look like? All in all, we collected and reviewed over 20 examples of different handbooks. We realized that most other library systems had some personnel policies, and then they also had an employee handbook. So that was kind of the model that we were looking at that point. As Mike mentioned, we had previously collected some branch-specific orientation documents, which had a lot of this information. It just wasn't consistent across all JMRL branches. Mike and I met with the then director of HR in the city of Charlottesville to discuss, and we were encouraged to proceed in this fashion as the city departments frequently had an equivalent, what they call operating procedures, like standard operating procedures per each department. So it's distinct from the city's personnel manual. They all have to follow the personnel manual just as JMRL does, but the individual departments had their own standard operating procedures, which is the equivalent to an employee handbook here. So in the end, the goal was to codify and standardize this information across JMRL to give all current and new incoming staff the same basic information about what to expect during their employment. The final product is intended to be an operational document, letting staff know expectations and pointing them to the underlying policies where it's possible. So there's a lot of links in this document. It's a lot of like, here's what we say about eating, and here's the actual policy about that. Okay, so I'm going to share a few things on the screen here with you all.
And so while you're sharing that, I'll just follow up on that last point. So it's really a summary of what do you need to know. Pulls out the key points from the sort of various underlying documents, some of which are training documents and some are policies with links to those. And the total end product, I think I looked at it this morning, is 27 pages right now. So it's not hundreds of pages. It could be if you wrote out everything down, but I think it's I'm very happy with the scope. I'm very happy that we hit the right trade-off of being concise and pulling out the essentials, what you need to know, and then providing. There is some places where there's a fair bit of detail, and that was an explicit balance that we were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think this group met bi-weekly, basically. It was a big time commitment for staff and the board members there. Really hashed a lot of this stuff out. So the thing that this board has seen in the past, and that all JMRL staff have seen in the past, is the initial kind of table of contents. So we shared this earlier this year, and it was, here's the stuff that we think needs to be covered. What did we forget here? We got some feedback from staff saying, oh, we didn't get this covered, didn't get that covered, make sure that gets in there. So we started kind of with this broad outline of here are all the things that need to be covered. Here's what staff needs to know. Here are the things maybe that were policies that don't need to be policy anymore. For example, we had a parking policy, which was really only about parking at the downtown library. So some of that's going to move over into the employee handbook. So the board saw this and staff saw this, and we took the feedback back to the working group and began working on specific sections. We started with section 4, workplace and professional conduct, because it had the most stuff in it. It's like, here's the most stuff staff are going to need to know. We did one section at a time. The goal initially was to release them individually. We're going to say, here's section 4, here's section 3. But by the time we got kind of to the end of our review of section 4, we had already made pretty good headway on the rest and decided to package them all together, which is where we are today, basically. So this is cleaned up a little bit, but here are all those sections you saw: attendance and punctuality, requesting leave, professional attire, drugs and alcohol, children of staff at work. Here's our ethics. So I'm not going to go through the whole 27 pages today, luckily for you, but we went through every single section like that. So we got into the specifics first. Okay, well, what is our non-discrimination policy? We didn't have one at the time. We're going to have one pretty soon here, so we can link back to it. What is our sexual harassment policy? We follow the city of Charlottesville's policy, so there should be a link directly to that on our intranet. What is our telework policy, which, of course, was not really a valid thing until about 1.5 years ago. But now there's a link directly to the docs that staff need to use. We met bi-weekly to review progress here, and most of our time was spent on discussing details, trying to come up with consistent standards that could apply across all JMRL, but would also allow flexibility so that staff and their managers can meet the unique needs of their branch or department, because things are different at the Nelson branch on any given day than they are here at Northside, right? So trying to strike that balance of here's the consistency of the service that we want to provide, here are the tools you need to use it, and then here's a little bit of flexibility where it's possible.
And I think a couple junctures you took specific questions that the working group had identified to the full managers meeting to say, and my impression was you were basically told them, hey, you guys are doing a little bit differently, but we're going to make a branch wide, and they sort of negotiated and hash it out, came to the working group and wrote one thing down.
We focused quite a bit on trying to find a consistent tone, so less formal than kind of legalistic policy language at the high level. Relied heavily on Megan England's skills as a published author to come up with a consistent voice. She really went above and beyond to smooth the whole thing out for us. And we tried to link back to JMRL's policy or other existing documents, such as the assessment manual that JMRL has, the training manual, City of Charlottesville's personnel manual, wherever possible. So it's like, here's what you need to know, but here's where all the real detail is about it for staff. So the idea is to give a brief summary of each bullet point there, and then to link back to the whole thing further detail. So in the end, we've got 127-page, as Mike said, handbook that is pretty much ready to go. We've got a meeting of this working group on Wednesday to hash out some last-minute details, some things that we left on the table 2 weeks ago, some meat on the bone. And once that's done, we'll be ready to share this with board and staff for any comments. So you should expect by the end of this week, unless we run into some major hiccup, a copy of this or a link to this available for you all, and then some sort of format so that you can send feedback in, likely a survey or a document of some sort. And then we need to come up with some procedures for having all staff sign off on having received and reviewed the handbook. We want to integrate the handbook review into onboarding for our new staff as they come in. So we make sure that there's a process there where they receive this. It's because it's not a book anymore, I gave Alita and Meredith a book about the becoming a trustee. So this is more like, here's a link. So we need to make sure we iterate the importance of it and come up with a process there. We want to share this with the City of Charlottesville HR department, just so they can see the final product. They were at the beginning of this procedures there. And then we want to implement a workflow for periodic review for new and edited content. Things are going to come up that we didn't think about. We're going to put this out to staff, and they're going to say, hey, you forgot. In fact, we did one of the sections on leave. We went through the whole thing. The whole working group talked about it for 2 weeks. And at the end, somebody who wasn't at the meeting emailed back and said, you guys forgot annual leave. You forgot vacation, sick time, personal time, bereavement time, all these things. So I'm sure there are other areas like that we have blinders on. I think I would be interested moving forward in this board discussing how best to have board input. The personnel committee makes sense to me, that they would kind of look at it annually and see if there are revisions or take input from myself or other staff about it. So a lot of work went into this, but I think it's going to be a great thing for JMRL in the long run to have these things kind of codified, written out, standardized where we can.
I think for the review committee, you probably would like them to check all the links. Because I've run into that before, where they're relying on the links to other people's
Yes.
websites to make sure they're not moving pages
Yes.
around.
That's an excellent point. Most of the links are internal, but we could run into that same problem.
Charlotte decides to do their
Sure.
internal website.
Yeah.
Things around it, and now you're not like.
That's a great point.
So I would put that on a little list.
Put it on the annual to-do
Because
list.
it's something you don't actually think about clicking everything again. Until someone needs
Until
it.
somebody says, oh, wait.
When I do it once.
Mike, anything else to add?
Well, so in terms of next steps, we'll get feedback from full staff, from the trustees. There'll probably be a couple more working group meetings to incorporate that feedback. I would be interested, and I'll throw it out for discussion by the board. This is a procedure level document. It's sort of an operational thing. But I would be, a lot of times when we looked at examples, we would see adopted by Board of Trustees. I don't think we would adopt this, but I think it would give David the strongest sort of, it would strengthen this as a tool for his use if the board endorsed it in some fashion. So I don't know exactly what in terms of the rules of order, or what that would be, a resolution or an endorsement of some sort.
That's what I'm kind of wondering.
Yeah.
Can we just phrase that as a resolution of endorsement?
Yeah,
And-
so if we did, I would be interested in doing that at the very end.
Mhm.
That will go at, if that happens, then it would be at the bottom of the title page. And then staff would know, hey, it's not just the director who's put this together for us or my branch manager, it's the whole organization's on the same page at every level. And then, as David said, sort of an annual review of what, I think during the year, staff and managers would make tweaks, and then
Mhm.
sort of annually, perhaps the personnel committee would just look at it regularly and see all the red lines and say, it sounds great, you know.
Does any of that other stuff reach the the policy level of, setting up the annual?
There's a
review
lot of
the-
stuff that came out of this that went to the policy. In
Uh-huh.
fact, I think all the policies we're discussing that came out of this process.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
know,
But in terms of getting this operational for you, is there anything else that we're waiting on that we could package it together with when we're doing this kind of resolution, the other changes that you were talking about?
I think that the policies that we have upcoming, the non-discrimination policy, the religious accommodations policy, those are all referenced in here, so that we can finalize those internal links to say, here you go to the actual policies.
Okay,
But there's nothing else that's kind of out there in
okay.
the wind.
Well, I'd be happy to work with David to draft that resolution of endorsement when the time comes. But it sounds like we're a couple months away at
Yeah,
least.
realistically, I would guess
I would guess
two
October,
meetings from now,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, well, let's all look for that email you said in about a week's time or
Should be
so.
by the end of this week.
By the end of the
We've got a
week.
meeting on Wednesday, so.
And please do, if you have time, add your comments into an overview of it. I know that that's always helpful. And yeah, let's give that a good look over before we plan on voting on it in October. Thank you, David. And thank you, Michael.
And thank you in particular, again, to all the staff members
Yes.
who I mentioned at the first, because this really involved a lot of, there was some institutional knowledge that, well, we've done it, we've done this, but there was a step of have to write it all down. And that took a lot of time and those people did the bulk of that, work, so.
Thank you all. Okay, moving along. Policy committee report. We have two committee reports here on the agenda.
Okay. So policy committee discussed today a couple of things that we've been discussing had gone through review by our own attorney, but also we were required to get sign off for some of these personnel related things from City of Charlottesville. So they've gone through review by the City of Charlottesville's legal team. And one of those that we can present so there's two of those that got some updates. Religious accommodations we read last month, and we have an agenda item later and we'll update on some small wording updates from there. Today, we looked and we finalized the proposed non-discrimination policy. And David's sharing that. And just the history of what the edits you're seeing here. This was recommended by our attorney from some of the conversations related to employee handbook that we have a non-discrimination policy or add one. The black text here was recommended by our own attorney. Then the committee looked at, and just for sort of clarity's sake, we made the red edits. And then City of Charlottesville came back with the green edits. Today, the committee looked at the whole thing as the very latest and is ready to recommend this to the board for a first reading today. And I think this partly falls in the category of things that are the right thing to do, and also that we have to do by other underlying law. But this is just our, for various reasons, our statement that we're kind of explicitly adding to our policies.
Does anybody have any questions about those edits in green or red
Well, actually, not.
or anything else? Yeah, sorry.
I think it's the first time that this board has seen the whole
Right,
thing.
right.
so-
I'm just wondering if anything's jumping out
When I
right.
first read that, I said, some words are missing in that first line, or we're talking about two different things in that first paragraph. That the first, like, okay, where it says equal employment opportunity. Okay, JMRL, okay. But to me, those first 4 lines are talking about the people that are out there on the floor. And so to me, it actually should start with JMRL, and then it goes down to the people on the floor,
Sure.
rather than the way it has. But, you know, and actually, this next paragraph would actually end up going to me, would go with the JMRL piece. Because they're talking about, okay, these are the people that JMRL has hired, and if they are experiencing this or witnessing this discrimination, blah, 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 then they have the duty to report that. So all of that to me looks like it, you know, that first part is a totally different thing.
Sure. So that sounds like formatting edits to rearrange the
Yeah.
sequence of information, but not necessarily changes to the
No,
information that's
the
presented. Okay.
information is good, you know, we've got some redundancy here in that.
Well, let me ask you to do this, and if anybody else has comments on this first draft that we're looking at here now, let's, if you would just, can I ask people to write you, Michael, and
Yeah.
put that in writing so that it's a little bit easier to track with
Okay,
any
yeah.
other changes that might need to be made before we vote on this, and we'll.
I also had just a question or a note. I really appreciate the revisions that have just been suggested. I think that's a wonderful sentence that seems buried in the middle of the draft, what seems to be highlighted here, because everything else flows from that claim. That is not just about a set of words, and then you back it up with all the great policy statements. One of my questions was about one of the red edits, about in the second paragraph, an employee who feels they have experienced or witnessed discrimination or sexual harassment. And I'm just wondering why we are drawing out sexual harassment as being separate from any other form of harassment that might happen because of some of the reasons mentioned above. Like when, you know, like we added, for example, military status, marital status, you know, medical conditions, all of these things, one can be discriminated on because of these reasons. I was just wondering why the committee or what felt necessary to single out sexual harassment. I also was kind of concerned about an employee who feels, I don't know what that, like an employee, if you feel like you've been discriminated against, so if you feel like you've seen discrimination, I don't know, there's something about that who feels like, or feels they have, as if that's not actually accurate. Like there's a difference between feeling and believing or facts. I don't know. There was just something a little odd about that. But I don't want to, that's just nitpicky. And so that's not worth acting on, but I just wanted to mention that one. But I do have I'd love to hear some feedback on the sexual harassment part in red.
I think I can give a little context there, Lisa. The City of Charlottesville's personnel manual has a very specific procedure for how to deal with sexual harassment. And they have a separate sexual harassment policy. So when the committee was discussing this, we felt that sexual harassment was covered, you know, JMRL lives under the umbrella of the city's personnel policies. We felt that the sexual harassment piece was already covered there. So there had been some talk about, do we need 2 policies? Is this one policy basically? But we didn't find that there was a non-discrimination policy there that was meeting JMRL's needs. So I think that this got thrown in, the sexual harassment got thrown in basically to point back to the city of Charlottesville's policies and procedures there, so that we would have a place for it where we don't otherwise have a separate called out policy for it.
I see. Okay.
That doesn't mean that it has to stay that way, but I think that's some of the background.
Yeah, and I would even add, so our council suggested, he recommended that we have a non-discrimination policy and a harassment policy. And he even, just like you see the black text came from
Yes.
that, he gave us a whole separate harassment policy. But as David just described, we felt that was covered. So we didn't feel the need to develop a separate harassment policy and recommend that we have that JMRL has one. But yeah, so that's sort of, we were looking at two things and we from the attorney, and we felt like one of them was covered elsewhere.
Right.
But I do yeah, take your, I see what you're getting at, is why is this a special?
So is removing sexual and just adding harassment there?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because it would be covered, right? There's no way someone's gonna, be, sexually harassing or toxic or whatever and be like, oh, well, I'm allowed to do that because it's not in this non-discrimination policy. Yeah, I don't think, I totally get that. I think that crossing it out makes it seem more inclusive.
Yeah.
Ironically, than, I don't know, just the idea, because nothing else, it'd be like putting in religious harassment. And like, why choose that over all of the other things that are described in the current first sentence? So, I think the edit's right.
And it looks like the city attorney just uses the word harassment in the equity and non-discrimination. That green line is from the city attorney, right?
Yeah, they just use harassment.
They just use harassment.
Thank you. Good observation there.
Can we, before we move on, Thomas, if you don't mind, so Alita, to address your initial kind of structuring thing there. So if we just took the equal employment opportunities, not just a set of words, and put that at the top,
Right.
Right.
does that, the rest of it flow?
Hey, I like it.
Okay, but then now that very last paragraph, that needs to go
In the middle.
in the middle. When I take some of that, okay, on that last paragraph, yeah, go ahead, put it in the middle, where it says, employees are required to report incidents to either their immediate supervisor, their department head. I'd stay away from other department heads. I mean, that would be a sticky wicket as far as I'm concerned. You go to a different department heads and, well, that guy over there is doing this. You've got your supervisor, you've got your, your department head, plus you have your library director. I mean, you've got three people, I don't think adding any other department head would help. I think that would cause a lot of friction in the workplace.
That's potentially a great point. This wording is directly from that policy.
They are wrong, then. They are wrong.
I think we're pretty married to that. No, I'm not sure. We could ask the city attorney. For sure.
But I
Yeah,
think,
actually, I think it is good to keep it in, because if the issue is with one of these other two people, then you should feel comfortable going to another department head. And I think that's actually pretty standard language, that you have the option to go to somebody other than your immediate supervisor or
You've got
their
different
department head.
people there that are listed, is what I'm saying. That's why I said I don't think you need to go to.
I see your point there, but the way I look at it with the department heads is if you're authorizing one to be capable of receiving these complaints, you kind of set a standard at that level within the organization that your department heads are capable of receiving those complaints, and hopefully doing so in a professional manner that minimizes the amount of friction within the organization. And I agree, to Carla's point, that then what you've done there is establish as many kind of safe points of access for any individual who wants to come forward and make a complaint as possible. I think that makes sense, but it sounds like it's coming from city HR anyway, so it might not be too.
Yeah, I think, we would have to go back.
Could be.
Well, not necessarily.
We can ask,
They
yeah.
understand that we're a different organization and our needs are different. I think they would hear that, but this wording did come from that policy. So.
Yes, Michael, we've cut and pasted here.
Well, I did want to point out something that's subtle, if you go to the top, and it's the reason for the original ordering, and I wonder, so this first paragraph, the first paragraph, I agree, Alita, I very much agree with the idea of organizing things to provide the proper context and then the details. I think that's what you're trying to get to. And there's a lot of stuff in our policy manual over time where I think we've been able to improve the wording. This paragraph, as it's written, applies really to inter-workplace stuff because of that word. Equal employment, if you're using this as your contextual definition, what it says right now is equal employment opportunity is a commitment to take affirmative action to provide a workplace in which qualifications, merit, and fairness. So I think our non-discrimination goals are broader than the workplace and inter-staff interactions. We want to make sure we extend this sort of non-discrimination principle to patrons, where we have
Right.
members of the public and so forth. So I wouldn't want the first paragraph to contextualize the rest of it as being sort of workplace only.
So I think if you would put that intro.
Yeah, well, so let me suggest this and see what you think about it. So if we went to the now third paragraph and added something at the beginning, just saying JMRL is committed to non-discrimination in all of its operations or something like that. That would perhaps give the context that you're looking for from that first sentence. Then you continue with employees don't discriminate anywhere. And then we start talking about workplace. What do you think about that? Does that accomplish what you were?
So you're moving back. Are you keeping the?
I think I'm moving the third one back to the front. What's now the third back to the first, but we're adding one, but what you're looking for, I think, is a broad statement, which we didn't really start off with, I agree. But we just would add one broad sentence.
I think, excuse me, but I know I can't vote on this, but I will, as a writer, just say something. I think the issue is we're putting on 4 members of the public into what is actually an employee policy. So you're not asking that if I'm working at a desk and I discriminate against somebody who's at the counter or who's a customer, then I'm supposed to follow these policies. I'm not supposed to go tell, and do you know what I'm saying? Like someone who sees that isn't supposed to tell on me. So I feel like the members of the public is getting kind of stuck onto there, and that's causing a lot of friction here because it's not, you're not supposed to follow those rules. Does that make any sense? I'm not saying that we're allowed to discriminate against members of the public, but I'm just saying.
Tony's got his hand up here too.
I think he's probably trying to join.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, in the interest of keeping our conversation moving along here, because we have another committee report we need to get to, and this is just our first reading, so we don't need to get it into final form to vote on today or anything. And you will have a chance to vote on this, Meredith.
Next time, see, I pushed it forward.
So I'll just ask again, Michael, if you wouldn't mind receiving a few emails,
Okay.
Please reach out to Michael with further changes, and Michael, please discuss with David how you see this working, what we've come to today, and
Okay.
We'll get another draft from you. Or gosh, does this need to go back through a policy committee then?
Maybe. So let's see what the feedback is, and
We'll just put a TBD on
Yeah,
this for a little while, and
Yeah.
okay, great.
Yeah. It might not need to go back to policy if it's just a matter of reorganizing things and adding a few
If
words.
it's formatting
Yeah.
and not information, yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much.
Group
Budget.
writing is my favorite.
Yeah.
We've got a committee for you, Lisa.
Oh, I bet you do.
Um,
That's sarcasm, but okay.
Now that we have got Tony here, we can move on to the Budget and Finance Committee report.
Sounds good. We had a meeting of the Budget Committee, of which I am apparently now chair.
Sorry.
And I appreciate everybody's help in getting me up and running. And the purpose of this, as David described in his email to you folks, was to propose three different scenarios for getting us to $15 an hour minimum wage for all employees at the university, while addressing the compression issues that we've been facing over the past few years and so forth. In the interest of brevity, I'll say that the last proposal on the docket, which of course, again, was in that email from David to all of you. Did everybody get a chance to read those?
David's going to pull it up here on the screen share.
Thank you. Let me run through it. So the first scenario, where we ask for the entire amount at once from the jurisdictions starting in July of 2022, would be in the neighborhood of $279,480. And that means that we'd be asking each of the jurisdictions for the amounts that you see here on the screen. And again, in addition to any staff raises or new positions or increased operational costs required, so the actual amount that we would be asking as an increase from the jurisdictions would be that much. That's if we just said, hi, we'd like to do this in July of 2022, and we want you to do a fully funded thing. Bear in mind that the state has mandated a $15 an hour minimum wage in 2026, so that any state agency or another, basically $15 an hour for the entire Commonwealth. So the second scenario was to roll it out over 3 years, charging the jurisdictions incrementally per year, which gets us to $15 an hour in July of 2025. And that's still a year ahead of the scheduled state laws mandating. So there were different year one costs. We'd go up to $12 an hour for a total extra cost of close to $70,000. And you can see the figures that we would be asking the jurisdictions for there. Then in year two, we'd go up to $13.50 an hour, asking for a little bit more money from each jurisdiction at that point. And then down in year three, to get us to $15 an hour by 2025, we'd be asking for the same amount as in year two. So $65,000 from Albemarle, 23 from Charlottesville, 6 from Greene, 7 from Louisa, and 3.4 from Nelson. Again, in addition to any raises or any other increment or increase in hours and in the branches. So the third proposal was to move to $15 an hour next year, July of 2022, but charge the jurisdictions over a 3-year period and use our year-end fund balance to make this happen. As most of you know, we have a 5% reserve that we are allowed by the regional agreement to carry over every year. So by using those funds in years 1, 2, and 3, we could get to $15 an hour next year in July of 2022, and then basically use the reserve as we go along to fund that, realizing that the jurisdictions would be paying the full cost of at the end, they'd be paying the full cost at the end of those 3 years. So in other words, in July of 2025, the jurisdictions would be paying the full $15 an hour. Again, a year to go before the state mandate. David, I think those were the salient points. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's correct. The only other thing was that the committee did make a recommendation.
Yes, I was getting to that. Committee did make a recommendation to go with option 3. 2 reasons, one of which, of course, was lesser impact to the jurisdictions and probably less pushback from the jurisdictions on that plan. I raised the point, and other people seem to agree, that this would also be a very good public relations move for the library to be able to say, we are raising minimum wage to what will be the state standard. We are beating the state mandate by 3 years, and that this is something that we feel we should do for the community. Questions?
My first question is with regard to the compression issue that this will create. Is the plan then to put off trying to fix that compression issue until after these 3 years have run their course? Because, okay, I was just wondering if these numbers were not inclusive of any kind of changes we'd be asking. Yeah.
They do include so the personnel committee had staff presented to them, here's some options for how we could address this $15. And the one that they chose was salary penetration. And that's what we did here, basically plotted everybody that's under $15, actually under 17 is the move, and kept their relative position while moving the pay scale up so that there's no leapfrogging.
Mhm.
There's nobody that has been in a position that's a higher band or stage that's going to get jumped by somebody who's below them while they're making their move up to 15. So everybody moved incrementally. It's not just the $11 to 15, the 11.24 go to 15.24, something like that along the way. So it prevents that, but it does not prevent the compression up the pay scale.
Mhm.
We just finished a compression adjustment last year, basically, and JMRL's gonna have to do another one at the tail end of this, basically, because the stated goal is at 8 years of employment at JMRL, you're at the midpoint of the pay range. And we will be off of that because the pay range is gonna be a moving target.
And if future budgets were to include any cost of living adjustment or anything like that for people who were above that part of the pay scale affected by these changes, that's not included in the additional jurisdictional
Correct,
costs?
that's not
Okay,
included.
okay.
So the hope would be that our jurisdictions next year would support both the cost of living increase for all staff and then also this compression adjustment. If they do that, then it's gonna, not that it's savings, but that say 2% that the bottom of the pay scale would have gotten would be kind of eaten up by this project.
Right.
The spreadsheet that David and AJ generated to show all these options was truly mind-boggling. And I really appreciate all the work that they put into this to look at these different options and to address again the compression ratio, the compression issue, and so forth. So anyway, I wanted to make sure they got credit for that.
Love a good spreadsheet. This is what Tony's referring to, and you can see here that currently out of the 125-ish employees, here's the line, $15 is an employee number, that's 52 actually. We've got quite a few employees that are under the $15 either way, no matter which of those suggestions the board takes. We're also looking to get all the folks that are under $17, so the next little match up there, move those up to help soften the blow of some of that compression moving forward.
So altogether in that plan 3, we're looking at $465,000 of additional costs coming out of JMRL's reserve fund. Yep, over the next 3 years. Okay.
So I apologize for not having asked this question in advance because you could have given probably a more detailed answer, but just for myself and maybe some others, can you review what is the general fund? Where does the incomes and the outflows in normal order go?
Sure.
And what have been sort of our historical balances for the past couple of years? And then if we did implement this, what would be sort of the projected balances? Right. I'm just curious how, I know you've described it as a well, you're about to go there perhaps.
Yes.
But how low would the well dip, do we think, if we took 200K out of it for next year?
So our audit for last year is not done yet, but we are projecting that the well was full at the end of last fiscal year when AJ and Terry closed out the fiscal year. We were there basically. Our regional agreement says we can carry over 5% of our operational budget. So that's the well.
And what is, just as a number, and ballparks are great, are fine on all of these. What is that? Is it?
We're projecting it to be about $430,000 this year.
Yes.
So that's $430,000 that can sit in a general fund that JMRL can hold on to, basically. In the past, we have said that money is reserved for regional costs, basically. I remember a scenario a few years ago when one jurisdiction asked JMRL to dip into the reserve fund, the general fund rather, in order to make up for a shortcoming. And the board at that time discussed it and said, no, it was only something that would work for everybody because everybody paid into it, basically. If we carry over more than that 5%, if the well is full, then we return money to the jurisdictions, which is a rare occurrence, but it has happened. We did it last year because of the closure in Q4 of 2020. We basically, whatever flows over the top of the well, we collect and figure out what the percentages were that each, we use the same percentages that we use for regional costs. We return those funds back to Albemarle, Charlottesville, Green, Louise, and Nelson. We also did that, I think, 3 years ago.
And David, you also mentioned in the budget committee meeting that the reserve is probably right at 5% this year because of reduced costs during COVID. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, more than anything, it's salary savings. JMRL budgets for a full complement of staff, basically, and we are currently sitting on more open positions and have been since the beginning of the fiscal year than I can ever remember. So we're expecting to, if nothing is done, to be at the 5% mark, the well being overflowing again at the end of this fiscal year. What we have done in years past is come back and had this board decide how to allocate some funds in order to bring the water level down a little bit to fill back up to 5%. So traditionally, those have been costs that have to be regional. So in the past, we have bought books and materials that staff have come back to the board and say, can we have a grant basically from the general fund for $50,000 to $1,000 for that? We bought computer purchases sometimes that come out of that as opposed to the equipment fund. John, I know, and Bill would come to the board and say, hey, next year we're going to need to buy $50,000 worth of equipment. Can we buy that now from this general fund, basically? So there has been no consistent vision about what do we want to do with this money time over time. When we reported to the state, we reported as a rainy day fund of sorts, and it has been used that way at least once in my 20 years here, where there was a scenario in which JMRL was working on the assumption that healthcare costs in a budget year were going to be X dollars, but then into the budget year it was discovered they were going to be Y. And that was a 6-figure discovery that had to go back to the general fund. So this will definitely take a chunk out. I'm expecting that next year's, it depends on what our operational budget is going into next year, but I'm expecting that it'll, 430, I think, for this year. Next year it should go up a little bit from that. So after year one of this, it would be cut, a little over half, basically. But at the same time, I'm expecting salary savings this year to come back up there for probably 6 figures. So I would think that we would be somewhere around 300,000 at the end of this year. And then next year, JMRL would be paying 186 out of it. I would expect the same. So we would be down maybe to 200,000. The following year, I would expect that 69,000 to be covered by savings. So I would expect, and this is off the top of my head, this is not the actual projections.
Right.
I can go back and look at them. But I would expect that in year 3 of this, the worst case would be half the wells, which is still a significant reserve to have. And I will point out that this money is directly from our local jurisdictions. It's not any state money or federal money. This is money from Charlottesville, Albemarle, Louise, and Nelson that they have paid into an operational budget over the years that has been just carried over. So this seems like a really good expense of that, basically, to spend it on staff salary.
Yeah, in that sense, it's been pre-funded by the jurisdictions.
That's part of it.
Any other questions? Well, Tony, thank you. And thank you very much for taking over that committee. I'm sorry I was unable to reach out to you in this last month. It has been hectic down in Scottsville, but I will catch up with you soon, I promise.
Yeah, not a problem, Thomas. Thank you.
Well, if nobody has any other questions on that, a vote on that is our next agenda item. Tony or David, any last comment that you guys would like to make?
Basically, this will be the board telling staff, here's how to craft next year's budget.
Mm-hmm.
So we will, based on what is decided today, we'll go back and start making a budget for next year. We've got some of the work done on personnel there, but we'll look at other factors and work with the personnel committee and whatnot. But we need to know which of those scenarios we're going to use because it will change how the budget is done.
Okay. Well, do I hear a motion to endorse one of those 3 scenarios or to table this discussion for more work?
I move.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got James here with. Oh, okay. Jim is deferring. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I think it's Wendy.
That was Wendy there. Wendy, go right ahead.
Wendy.
Oh, I was just going to say I move that we accept the committee's recommendation for plan number 3.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Well, that sounds unanimous. Thank you all very much.
That was my recommendation anyway.
Okay, well, the other vote we are taking this afternoon, moving along in our agenda, will be on the religious accommodations policy. Michael, can I punt this back to you for a brief refresher on where we last saw this?
Sure. So we had a first reading. This again is part of the same theme that you've been hearing in terms of something that came out of the handbook working group and was, in this case, was drafted by, again, our council and recommended to us. We made some, at the committee level, we made some tweaks. And we'd had a reading of essentially the text that was in black at our last board meeting. Between then and now, the city of Charlottesville review added the wording in red. It's my sort of assessment that it doesn't change the sort of the meaning or the intent or the goals, but it's just adding some things that they felt were appropriate or necessary just from a legal background standpoint. So we could choose today to say that, well, these changes are just in line with any other, on the spot changes we might make that don't make a big difference. But if any board member feels that we should have this as sort of a first reading because the changes in their opinion are substantial, then we could read it today and vote next month. It's just open to the floor whether we have a vote on this today, I think.
Thank you very much. Looking at the changes in red there, does anybody feel like this is a material change that they might want to take a month to mull over before a vote?
I will say the policy committee did look at the changes today and was able to kind of recommend the current version.
Thank you.
If that makes a difference.
That is very helpful.
Yeah, I couldn't hear. You said they did look through it and recommend it?
Yes.
Wendy, we re-looked at it today because the policy committee meeting was just before this meeting. And
Right.
and the policy committee was able to sort of recommend this updated version.
Okay. Okay. I just couldn't hear you. Thank you.
Yep.
This is Tony. I like the changes. I think they make a lot of sense, and I think it does clarify some stuff.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Would anybody like to make a motion to adopt this religious accommodations policy?
I'll make that motion to adopt.
Thank you, Alita. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you all very much. The motion will carry. All right. Now we get to me. I've had a chance to look through the responses that we've gotten so far to the self-evaluations. We only had 5 of those come in, so I'd like to extend that a little bit longer. I don't feel like we're on any particular deadline. It's more useful to have a productive conversation with that. So I'll just take this opportunity to please remind you all, if you haven't had a chance, and Meredith, if you'd like to take a look at it and just see, I don't know if you'd find it at all useful to jump through, but David could send it to you, and then at least you'd be familiar with the discussion that we will have probably next month. Yeah, so just if you haven't had a chance to do that yet, we'll extend that one more month, and please do fill that out, and we'll put a little conversation about that on our agenda for next month. Committee assignments. If we could, while we're all here, we started this conversation last month about well, what would we all be interested in? And I have not yet had a chance to, actually, let's not do that while we're here. I haven't yet had a chance to reach out with you guys between my home internet now being out for 23 days and the opening of the DMV Select down in Scottsville. I will And in the interest of time, sure, I will punt on that one for this month as well, and I'll reach out to each of you by email to coordinate a time that works with your schedule for a quick phone call, and we can chat a little bit before next month about committee assignments, if that works with everybody.
That sounds good.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry about the chaos on my end, but next month we'll move forward with both of those. David, could you catch us up on your report?
Sure. Yeah, a few things to report here. So the staff emergency planning committee has been hard at work again. Meeting tomorrow. The last time we met was 2 weeks ago, and did make a change to tier 1 guidelines for staff. This is our COVID response plan. We're at tier 1, which is the best tier except for tier 0. It's very confusing.
Does it line up with the state?
No.
No, ours doesn't.
Ours is special, right?
Ours doesn't either.
So tier 1 is basically full operations. All branches are open for full hours. Almost all services are available. And as I've been saying the last few meetings here, the big question was about library programming and how to safely reinstitute library programming and finding a balance between virtual and in-person programming, whether that would be hybrid or outside. So the change that came out 2 weeks ago rather, was that staff masking is now mandated again. So all JMRL staff are required to wear masks when they're in the public area, basically, unless they're in a room alone or while eating or drinking. So we're going to continue to review these things. We're keeping a hard eye on data. A lot of the plans for scaling up programming in person have had to be adjusted, because I forgot to mention program attendees also required to mask. So if we're having a book discussion group and it's in person, everybody in the program is going to be wearing a mask. So a lot of the book groups that had come back to in person are now reviewing hybrid or virtual options. Some of them have moved back already. The story times that were being planned for the fall are now mostly outside story times. We've got quite a few of those happening in quite a few branches. So Delta has definitely been a kick in the teeth after kind of getting everything to a really happy point, but this is the story all across the nation. So our goal is not to lose any service hours and to continue to provide good service to folks, which we've done throughout. The library has really met this challenge in interesting and exciting ways. But some of the last steps towards being a fully armed and operational library, which is programming, are a little bit on hold while planned. So I'll lead with the bad news stuff. The good news I mentioned to you all, this group talked about teacher cards coming out a while ago. Those did go live last month. This was an initiative that came out of the Staff Customer Service Committee chaired by Brittany Eversberg. And I have seen, I know Jenny put on a big push in green, has been talking to the schools in green and the librarians in green. It's a way for teachers to get a card which allows them a little bit extra time with their materials, has some different fine structures, and allows teachers, educators that live outside of our service area to check out books for their classroom. So also the new orientation for the City of Charlottesville, they mentioned this too for their teachers. So this is a big thing. We likely will try to do some PR on this. It's a good way to meet community needs at a time in which not every kid can make it to the library. Update on the Scottsville Library, which of course had a tree fall on it during the storm event that left Thomas without any internet for 20 some days. It was quite disruptive for the library. A branch did puncture the roof above the mystery and fiction section. All in all, I think about 200 books were destroyed there. But Ann Lindbergh and the staff at Scottsville did a wonderful job of clearing that whole area. They had to remove all the damaged books, take all the shelving down. They had to take up the carpet, patch the roof, the big dehumidifiers in to get the water up. So they were closed. The building itself was closed for about a week. They were able, though, to pivot to some curbside services so that folks in Scottsville could still come up and get materials, pick up holds and things like that. So this is one of those examples of lessons that were learned during the pandemic are going to help us moving forward when it comes to other, not just emergency situations, but providing service. I do want to update the board on a couple of key staff positions being filled. Today is the first day for Jennifer McAdam Miller as the new PR specialist for JMRL. She began today, most recently worked doing public relations for the International Neighbors Organization in Charlottesville. JMRL has also hired Kayla Payne as our collections and technology manager. She's not starting until late September, but she's taking over for Josh Howard. She's currently the technology services librarian at the Stanton Library. So she's moving over here. And I think I announced this before, but just I can introduce Sierra Hammond as our HR and collection specialist, formerly from the Crozet branch, right behind me, specifically trying to find a seat where she would not be on camera. But Sierra will be the one taking minutes for board meetings moving forward, so you'll see quite a bit of her. The city of Charlottesville has appointed a new liaison for JMRL, so this is good news. We have been working largely with the budget department for the past few years, but I met with the city manager, and he appointed Ashley Marshall, the deputy director for racial equity, diversity, and inclusion at the city of Charlottesville, to be the new JMRL liaison. I gave her a tour of the city branches, so Central, Gordon, and Northside. Ashley is a huge library supporter, and we're very glad to have that single point of contact there.
That's excellent.
She and I and the city manager and I talked quite a bit about a central renovation project, which this group had mentioned during my evaluation. Both of them are very supportive of the theory of the idea of renovating a central library. There's still plenty of work to do on our end. AJ and Krista and I met with the architects who did the 2016 design study, which was really based on 2014 numbers. And we're going to work on updating some cost estimates, work on the city and the county on CIP submissions. And as I mentioned last time we discussed this, begin gathering a working group of community members, staff and board members, and then city and county staff to start talking about these issues.
And potentially former trustees.
Potentially former trustees.
Yes.
Is there someone
Maybe. Yeah.
volunteering someone?
Yes.
Great, I'm glad to hear that. I'll talk to you after this meeting.
I'm glad you said former trustees.
Well, I also, Tony, former Friends board members as well have expressed an interest. So
I think the Venn diagram still doesn't include me, David, so.
I nominate Tony.
Yeah.
excellent. Okay, that is all I have to report, Tom.
Is there any update on the interlibrary loan program?
No, that is on hold. So that's the program, the pilot program that JMRL and UVA did to get University of Virginia books free to our JMRL patrons during the pandemic. It had to be restructured as their buildings were opened up to the public, but we are working with library staff on a more long-term solution.
Okay.
Likely it might be a little while.
Okay.
But thank you for keeping that on the radar.
Sure. Okay. Other matters on our agenda. Does anybody have anything else we did not get to on agenda items? Does not sound like it. Future agenda items. What are we coming back around to vote on? We have a couple of months before we need to do any handbook endorsements. What was that?
Committee.
I think so.
Oh, committees, yes, of course. Yeah, we'll keep the self-evaluation and committee assignments on old business for next month. Do you think changes to the other policy maybe for next month to vote on?
We, at a minimum, we'll show you where we are.
Okay. We'll keep that as a committee report at least.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to make sure gets on a future agenda item? Okay.
Just one thing, Todd.
Yeah.
If you can give us I am sure you will anyway, but give us an update on Scottsville. And how.
That's an agenda item.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I will keep you posted as anything moves forward with that sidewalk project. I think it'll probably be a little while yet of going through engineering before we have any concrete going in the ground, but.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I will definitely keep you all posted. Okay,
And
well,
Thomas,
yes.
we'll put the board self-eval committee assignments back on.
Yeah, just keep that on old business for next time. We'll keep the policy committee report and get an update on the other.
The only committee assignment that's gonna be pressing is the personnel committee. In September, the library managers will put in operational requests for next budget year, and at some point thereafter, it doesn't have to be before this board September meeting, but the personnel committee will review those and then basically recommend to staff which ones to include in our budgeting for next year. So sometime before the end of September, we'll have to have a personnel committee meeting, even if there's no chair there, we still want to pull it together.
I could certainly help you pull the meeting together if we didn't have a chair, but let me maybe optimistically throw out there, does that sound like an appealing chair to take as Carla steps off of the board? Is anyone interested in taking over the personnel committee work that she's been doing? If not, I'm going to hunt one of you down and make you sign up for it. Oh, thank you.
That's the spirit.
That's right.
And I
Yeah.
know we're starting to rotate in the coming months to the meeting to other branches. Is this North Side in September or?
It's Scottsville.
Okay.
Is that what we had to say? I'm sorry. I forgot.
Maybe that's what Tony was referring to, the fact that on our board, on our list of meetings, it's supposed to be in Scottsville.
Yes, we are. Look at that. I need to glue that to the front.
They have internet.
There is a roof. There is, as long as you're not on my Wi-Fi, there will be internet. Yeah.
So I will likely coordinate rides for anybody who wants to ride from Charlottesville down in the library van. I'm assuming we're gonna stick to that schedule.
Yeah, that sounds fine with me.
Because we can probably just switch off, Nelson is gonna be the next one.
Nelson was gonna be the next one in October.
The library's in good shape.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Trade. Yeah. No, I think at this point, they've got everything back up on shelves. The conference meeting room area is free of waist high piles of books. Yeah. Yeah, so Scottsville next month. Look forward to seeing you all down there. If you are coming early and want a lunch recommendation, let me know. I'd be happy to help. Yeah, I'll be at work right up until the 11th hour because I can do that without the commute.
Will there be a possibility of still having Zoom meetings?
Yes, yeah. We will still do the hybrid format. If you are, if you don't want to be there in person, absolutely log on remotely, and we will do this hybrid format for that meeting as well.
Okay, I want to be there, but the circumstances don't.
I completely understand, and I am happy to host anyone in Scottsville anytime that they feel like they want to come down and take a look around. Okay, without any further items for discussion, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting here. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Carla.
Carla, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Carla, thank you so much.
Take care. We'll see you around.
Y'all.
Take care.
Okay.